So imagine that you head to Atlanta, Georgia, because you want to see the Georgia Guidestones. Now, for those who don't know what the Georgia Guidestones are, I will get to that in a second. Now, just think about going there because you want to see it and it's been around for a while, so you want to take a look and you head there and you say, okay, interesting. There's a lot of different theories. Apparently, it's a time, an Armageddon doomsday time clock or predictor, if you will. A lot of people have many different interpretations of it, right? And I apologize, by the way, if I didn't describe that clearly, but that's not the point right now. So you go there and you see a person. Looks human, but they're very covered up. Okay, and you see this person, and it looks to be a woman of sorts, sort of like a nun. Their head is covered, and they've got what seems to be clothes on, but more like robe-looking things. And you see all of a sudden, it looks like a paintbrush is painting the stones, and you say, "Excuse me." Just curious, what are you doing? And you don't say that in an arrogant way. You just say it like, just can I ask why you're doing this? And they don't turn around to look at you, but they say, and in a very raspy voice, they say, "Oh, once a year we come do this." But it's only one person, so automatically you think, who's we, right? Long story short, the woman ends up telling you that it's polyurethane, but the woman never ends up really looking you in the face. You get a very weird feeling. You get a quick glimpse of her eyes, and her eyes are very, very black. And then she suddenly walks away. Someone else comes by, someone who lives near there, and says, "Oh, this person comes, I think, every 6 months, maybe once a year. That's about it." And you start to think, what the hell? Now, I want you guys to keep that story in mind. Now, before I get to that, I just want to thank you guys again for the live stream we did Saturday. It was fantastic. I'm still kind of recovering energy-wise, so if you'll excuse me if I take some more sips of water than usual. But anyways, I just want to remind everyone, too, that we have a new members-only Patreon episode coming out later today. Just putting it up quickly on the screen. Those are the 3 different packages. We're far less restricted on there, and that's why I'm promoting it that way. Now, let's get into it. The Wall. Resurrecting failed hybrids from Zone B. This is interesting, guys. I got to tell you. So, let's get into it. Now, let's take a look, for example, at what the Georgia Guidestones are. Because let's just start very basically. I'm sure a lot of you know what they are, but for those who don't fully understand, let's take a look. Very common, very strong, basic definition. And I quote, "The Georgia Guidestones, according to Wikipedia, are a granite monument erected in 1980 in Elbert County, Georgia, in the U.S. A set of 10 guidelines is inscribed on the structure in 8 modern languages, and a shorter message is inscribed at the top of the structure in 4 ancient language scripts," end quote. Now, long story short, it goes to talk about the details of them and what have you, but it was resurrected by a very anonymous group, okay? And the group that it was registered to, that resurrected these stones, was a licensed numbered corporation. Now, I need you guys to keep that in mind for me, please. A numbered corporation, okay? So, let's take a look at 365atlantatraveler.com, okay? And we could see here, I want to talk about certain things that it highlights. This website does a great job of highlighting what the Guidestones entail. Now, we're going to get to that old person, the old lady, or seemingly old lady brushing on the stones in a second, but it maintains that humanity should have an under 500 million population in perpetual balance with nature, right? This is not the first time we've heard this, but let's carry on. The guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity, unite humanity with a living new language, rule passion, faith, and tradition, all things with tempered reason, avoid petty laws and useless officials, let all nations, now this is the significant one, let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world order court. Okay, now we can go to the next things, balance personal rights with social duties, and don't be a cancer on earth, leave room for nature, and things like this. Okay, we can talk about all that, but the point here is this. The old lady that comes once to twice a year, that a lot of people, by the way, just basic eyewitnesses will tell you they see, has claimed and told some people, based off these eyewitness recollections of their memories, that polyurethane is what's being painted on top of the Georgia Guidestones. Now, what's interesting is that this polyurethane, and I say that with air quotes, seems to be something that entails a pseudoscientific apparatus, if you will, that is referred to as magnetic water. Let's take a look at that, and I quote. Now, guys, I know this might seem boring, but please just bear with me. Magnetic water treatment, also known as anti-scale magnetic treatment or AMT, is a method of supposedly reducing the effects of hard water by passing it through a magnetic field as a non-chemical alternative to water softening. However, that's not all that it does. But anyways, magnetic water treatment is regarded as unproven and unscientific, end quote. So before we go on, there's a few things here. The DISC theory, distributive idea suppression complex. This is a committee of people that said, listen, we're not going to take this seriously. This is pseudoscientific without even any studies or anything, any funding of the sort having to be the case to help it improve and help maybe possibly even justify and prove it to become a legitimate scientific thesis or hypothesis or even conclusion. Why is that the case? Take a look and just do a quick Google search of any type of funding for magnetized water. There isn't any. So how the hell is something considered fake or pseudoscientific if there's never even been funding for it to begin with? Now, the magnetic water can also carry certain droplets of blood from certain, I guess we could say, rituals, but that's for the Patreon members only episode, just because I can't really talk about that publicly, and if I could, believe me, I would. Anyways, let's take a look at this. For example, glennbeck.com, System X. Now, some of you may know Glenn Beck as a very controversial figure. He's become more legitimized in recent years, but he's not the first one to bring this up. I bring this up because he's one of the few people that likes to call it as it is in certain regards. I'm not trying to get political, but we have to see what System X is. And let's take a look here. And I quote, "Last night on the Blaze TV," this was 2011, "Glenn explained how and why schools are data mining." This is 2011. Data mining is only a big thing now in the public domain. Why was it mentioned so earlier before? By the way, the licensed company that resurrected these Georgia Guidestones is the same company, and we're going to get to this in much more detail very shortly, that has also been responsible for vast amounts of funding in the United States and in Israel for data mining in 2021, okay? And how the government is in bed with labor and big corporations using that data. They're creating a system of state capitalism, or System X. Okay, and the long story short here of System X is to essentially have a technocratic, top-down, one-world government. Now, I know that might sound like a lot of other conspiracy theories that you've heard and things like this, but just please bear with me. So, the next thing we have to take a look here is we have to take a look at the committee, not the company, the committee who resurrected these Georgia Guidestones. What's interesting is that this committee has financial ties, okay, to a certain company within Afghanistan, and that's going to be talked about in a members-only episode coming soon. But the point here is this. This company has money laundering operations that connect back to GA. What is GA? General Atomics, okay? And General Atomics, and I quote from their website, is an American energy and defense corporation headquartered in San Diego, California, specializing in research and technology development. This includes physics research in support of nuclear fission and nuclear fusion energy, end quote. Now, let's take a look, okay, at General Atomics and some of the patents they've licensed. So let's see here very quickly. I'm pulling this up right now. United States patent, 440 gigahertz lasers, okay? Let's put aside for a second, because we've been talking about this a lot. Let's put aside the fact that there's 440 hertz / gigahertz, or different units of measurement, but all revolving around the same tranquil, peaceful, vibrational brain of 440 hertz. Let's put that aside for a second. What they want you to look at here when we see these patents is they want you to look and see, my gosh, look at the inventors, Graham W. Flint, and they seem to have patented certain things that magnetized water has been attributed to as being what's quoted to be the polyurethane cover on top of the Georgia Guidestones, okay? Now you might say, Dave, why is that so significant? Well, what they want you looking at the names of the people who patented it. And I'm putting up some articles on the screen right now of certain instances where companies, journalists, mainstream media outlets, they go after the people that patented these things. They don't go after the assignee. Okay? Now, why is that the case? This is a perfect example of hiding things in plain sight. Excuse me. Now, let's look at the assignee on this patent. My God, General Atomics. Wouldn't you believe it? Now, that's not only the best thing. General Atomics, if you translate it into an alphanumerical order, okay, you know how, for example, the letter A equals the number 1, the letter B equals the number 2, the letter C equals the number 3, okay? General Atomics, it has the same amount of letters / numbers that represent the numbered company, number by number, letter for letter, word for word, all right, as the same mysterious, anonymous, licensed company that resurrected the Georgia Guidestones. Okay, and that's what's extremely incredible. Now, the next thing you might say is, Dave, what is Zone B? Zone B is allegedly a place underneath the Georgia Guidestones that has a deep underground military base that has something called the Wall. Now, what is the Wall? The wall is something where hybrid extraterrestrials, whether animal human or animal alien, human alien, you name it, or different types of even just alien species or artificially created or synthetically created hybrids in many different forms, are thrown against in order to reinvigorate and reuse a lot of their organs. Okay, and we're talking not about humans, we're talking about hybrids, so possible human alien, you name it. Now, the best example I could probably give of what this wall looks like would probably be from the film, I think it was with Natalie Portman in Annihilation. Okay, now the difference here is that this wall allegedly, by the way, has something on it, a certain type of liquid that never dries up. And according to many sources who have been down there, it is magnetized water. Now, we cannot prove that, but we have evidence to suggest that. And even if it isn't, okay, let's just say it honestly isn't. You're telling me it's a coincidence that General Atomic is involved in all of this? This is a perfect example of other companies like Lockheed Martin, their Skunk Works division. I mean, let's be honest, at least they freaking admit that 80% of their work is classified. Right? Now, the next thing we also have to take a look at here is we have to think, could it be possible that the people behind this company and the assignees of General Atomic are in fact extraterrestrials that resurrected this Guidestone? Now, you might say, Dave, why do they have such a negative agenda? Because the Guidestone talks about only, 500 million people should be on Earth, right, in order to maintain the balance of things. Guys, we have to open our perception of things. I'm not encouraging this, but if we had to justify it and look at all the angles here, we would have to understand that there's certain alien races that don't perceive things black and white, good or bad, the way that we do. They see it as the balance of nature and the necessity of things. Now, the best example might actually be Thanos from the film Avengers, and you see how this is another form, guys, of predictive programming. And if you take a look, this is also an interesting fact, if you take a look at the data of how many times the Georgia Guidestones were searched up, were looked up online, whether through Bing, Google, you name it, right? DuckDuckGo, what have you. What you're going to notice, according to these studies, is that the same time that the Avengers film came out, there was also a sudden spike by anonymous users using multiple very anonymous VPNs of the Georgia Guidestones. Do you think it's a coincidence? No. And I don't think that it's actual people that suddenly started searching up the Georgia Guidestones right when the Avengers Thanos, the first part, Infinity War, came out. I think it has to do with the subconscious aspect of psychological programming. Now look, I could be totally wrong. I'm going to be straight up with you guys. Okay, I'm not going to say this is for certain, but when we look at all of this, look at the different names of General Atomic, the license numbers. Okay, the polyurethane that's magnetized water, and then that also can, ironically, coincidentally, with air quotes, connects to the deep underground military base underneath the Guidestones that multiple sources have contacted me and told me seems to have a wall that seems to allow, when these hybrids are thrown onto the wall, the organs are still alive and can be reused for other hybrid experiments, seems to also have magnetized water on it. And it isn't ironic, it isn't a coincidence that all of a sudden the funding for magnetized water has never existed. Just think about that. It's never existed. How come no scientific institution, private or public, has ever received funding for magnetized water? I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but at the same time, I don't know if that can necessarily be good, and maybe it's just my limited way of thinking. So if you guys maybe want to help open my perception, let me know in the comments below. I'd be more than happy to hear what you have to say. Now, interestingly enough, when we take a look at this, General Atomics also has, aside from Lockheed Martin and EG&G, has the third most amount of private government classified contracts. Well, I guess we'll just call it a day. I mean, I guess they're all coincidences, right? I guess it's all a fluke. So, you know what I mean? And again, General Atomics, too, I just want to mention quickly, is responsible for manufacturing some of the best Reaper and Predator drones as well. So, I don't know how much more we can connect here. You know what I mean? Now, the next thing might be, Dave, how come you didn't jump into, specifically what the Georgia Guidestones are, what they say, and more about the stones in particular? Guys, it's sort of like the Stonehenge. It represents an overall and overarching meaning. but they want us to keep investigating the stones. They don't want us to look at the companies that resurrected the stones. They don't want us to look at the different alleged underground military bases directly underneath the stones. Do these stones emit a certain frequency that we do not know yet? I don't want to say that they do because I have yet to come across anyone who's told me, but I would dare to say you're not going to find some type of natural or what we perceive to be regular standard natural frequency emitting from it, or vibrational state emitting from it, right? And also, not only that, but UFOs are seen shooting beams onto the Georgia Guidestones. Not often, but it does happen, and the beams are blue, which also is consistent with the same beams that are used to summon humans when a lot of these aliens do not land their craft. Okay? So we have to take a look at all of this, and then we have to ask ourselves, is the Committee of 300 behind this? Were there certain Nordics or tall whites or certain ancient alien species that have not returned that sat on this committee in the 80s, which I can't mention publicly simply because of certain things that connect to a certain conspiracy theory that might get me taken down, which is why we have the Patreon. But you're going to see all this come full circle, right? So I want you guys to let me know what you think. Let me know if you find any of this to be a coincidence. By the way, all the evidence is in the description below if you're on YouTube, and we're going to catch you guys tomorrow. Cheers.